Hey, what's up? It's Mr. E here, and our aim for this video is how do we add and subtract radical expressions? All right, so what's the big idea with radical expressions and adding and subtracting them? Okay, so the big idea is that you can only combine like radicals. So for example, radical 5 and 2 radical 5, these are considered like radicals because the radicand is the same for both terms. So here's how you combine them. You just essentially add the coefficients. So radical 5 plus 2 radical 5 is equal to 3 radical 5, because the coefficient of radical 5 is 1. There's an invisible 1 there. So 1 plus 2 is 3, so you get 3 radical 5. Do not add or subtract the radicands. Okay, do not add or subtract the radicands. Only the coefficients. All right? Okay, so let me give you an example of two radicals that you can't combine. Radical 5 and radical 3, they cannot be combined because the radicand is not the same. You can only combine like radicals. Okay, so see if you can combine the like radicals here. Pause the video, take a minute, see if you could do it. Okay, so we're going to combine 2 radical 5 with 3 radical 5, and that's going to give us 5 radical 5, and we're going to combine radical 3 with negative 4 radical 3, and that's just going to be 1 minus 4, which is negative 3, so we get negative 3 radical 3. Okay, so the big idea is you can only combine like radicals. Okay, example 1, express in simplest radical form. Okay, so what you want to do first is simplify each radical by factoring out the largest perfect square that goes into the radicand. So we looked at this in our previous video. So we want to simplify radical 80. So we can simplify, radical 180, excuse me, I'm looking at this one here. We want to simplify radical 180, so let's do it. We can rewrite that as radical 36 times radical 5. And we also want to simplify radical 80, and we can rewrite that as radical 16 radical 5. So radical 180 we wrote as radical 36 times radical 5, and radical 80 we rewrote as radical 16 times radical 5. So we just take the square root now. So the square root of 36 is 6, so we're going to get 6 radical 5 there. The square root of 16 is 4, so we get 4 there. Just bring down the 2 and bring down the radical 5. Now we just have to multiply the 2 and the 4, and that's going to give us 8. So we got 6 radical 5 minus 8 radical 5. Combine the like radicals, we get negative 2 radical 5. That wasn't so bad, was it? Example 2, express in simplest radical form. Okay, so now we are just simplifying radical expressions, and we're dealing with variables here with exponents. So since we're dealing with square roots, we have to factor out the largest even power of the radicals. So let's go ahead and do that. This is already even. You see that? It's already even, so I'm just going to leave that alone and just rewrite it as negative x radical x to the sixth. I'm going to bring down the x squared. Now this here I could factor because that's an odd number. So I can factor that as radical x to the sixth times radical x. Okay, now how could I rewrite radical x to the sixth? Well, there's an invisible 2 there, so I can rewrite that as x to the 6 over 2. And same thing here. I can rewrite this as x to the 6 over 2. And then just bring down everything else. So bring down the negative x. I got x to the 6 over 2, bring down the x squared, times x to the 6 over 2 radical x. Now just simplify. So this is just negative x. That's going to be x to the third plus x squared times x to the third radical x. So this here, negative x times x to the third is negative x to the fourth. And this here, x squared times x to the third, that's x to the fifth. Bring down the radical x. So there aren't any like radicals to combine. So this is our final answer. Okay, example 3, express in simplest radical form. Okay, so first, factor out radical of perfect square. So let's begin here. Let's factor this out. So we can factor that out, and we get radical 9 x to the sixth times radical 3x. So 9 being the perfect square, that goes into 27. And then, to factor out x to the 7th, you got to factor out the highest even exponent. Okay, we can also factor this out. We can use radical 64 for the 192 times radical 3. And for the x to the third, factor out the highest even exponent. That would be x squared and x. So let's bring everything else down, and we get this. Okay, so just take the square root now, and we get this expression. So radical 9 is 3. Radical x to the sixth, if you recall, right? Radical x to the sixth is equal to x to the 6 over 2, which is x to the third. So that's how we got the x to the third here. Bring down the radical 3x. So over here, radical 64 is 8. So radical 64 is 8. Radical x squared is x to the 2 over 2, which is just x. So we got 8x. So this becomes 8x. But 8x times x squared is 8x to the third. So that's how we got that 8x to the third here. and then just bring down the radical 3x. So now we just multiply the negative 2 by the 3 here, and we get negative 6x to the third. Bring everything else down. So as you can see here, we have like radicals. So we have to combine the like radicals. So remember, you're just going to add the coefficients, only the coefficients. Only add coefficients. So that would be negative 6 plus 8, and that's going to give you negative 2. So we get negative 2x to the third radical 3x. That is our final answer. Okay, I hope this video helps. I definitely encourage you to go back and rewatch the parts that were difficult to understand. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get back to you ASAP. Okay, take care.